Hello everybody, my name is Vic Gilgis and this is the 23rd episode of the podcast that I do, and it's called, I'll have to have a look, Vagabonds and Kings, We Are All the Same. So I'm doing these podcasts to help you try and live a happier life, and obviously myself as well. And this is following on from last week, it's another not so happy one. It's one a little bit sadder, but it is, I hope, a grounding of grounding usefulness to us, in the sense that we often think that we are not as good as others, things going wrong in our lives and others have more, and we make comparisons, which is the killer of joy, by the way, and all that. And I mean, I'm sure you do understand this, but if we walked a mile in somebody else's shoes, then I think we might realise that things aren't so bad for us, because we don't understand what others go through, and why should we sometimes? And what can I say about that is that we're all built the same, and if anybody thinks that others don't suffer, well, we need to wake up, because as I've mentioned before, with the three principles, mind, consciousness and thought, which is the three inner qualities that we have, that we're, because of our thoughts and because of the fact that we are aware of our thoughts, then our thoughts can be good or bad or indifferent. And because we're thinking animals and we are aware of stuff, we're bound to get upset about stuff, we're bound to get depressed. At other times we can become elated because things are going perfectly right for us, and this has happened and that has happened, that's in our favour. That is life. Life's ups and downs, and just a simple thing really is that when life used to go down for me, I always used to know that it would go back up for me. And I know some of you may say, well, it never goes up for me. How can I, just quickly, going off the piece a little bit here, is that one course that I went on to was a Robert Holden course from the Happiness Project, and I'll go on about that in another podcast. But essentially, what I'm saying here is that at the beginning of that course, we were measured on our level of happiness using an Oxford scale, an Oxford questionnaire, and another questionnaire. I think that Robert Holden, who ran the course, a brilliant person, had devised, and we scored our levels of happiness, and at the end of the course we were assessed again, and in every case happiness levels were increased. So that is evidence, and I felt better. So it wasn't just kidology really, it actually did work. So in other words, no matter what, and we're all set differently, but despite that, we can raise our levels of well-being or happiness. So yeah, I realise that some people may say, well, I'm permanently down, etc., etc. But it's not so much of an intervention. I think it's a mindset that when we, like things like this that I'm doing, these podcasts and other things like that happiness course that happened on the Happiness Project. I think it was called Happiness Now. I can't remember, but I'll do a podcast in more detail on it. Forgot what I was talking about. But yeah, we could certainly shift, and things can get better for us no matter what our condition. And in fact, I used to be on Nottingham local radio, and I ran a course called, well, same as this, it was called Changing Your Life. And through the BBC, local BBC, Nottingham, they sponsored one particular student to come on my course, and they assessed him, like I've just mentioned, that type of thing at the beginning and at the end. And this guy, who believed me, it was a bit of a misery. And I felt a bit sorry for him. I mean, nothing could cheer him up, poor soul. And he didn't, to the outside view, and you can, and this is it, you can never, this is what this podcast is going to be about when I get around to it. You can never judge. You can never look at others and say, well, their life doesn't seem too bad compared to mine, or their life is better than mine. Anyway, what happened with this guy was, at the end of the course, the BBC assessed him, and he came on local radio to attest that he did feel better and was feeling improved. And I don't think there was any pressure put on him to be like that or say things like that. And certainly this particular guy would have not exaggerated, because he was on a bit of a downer all the time. But yeah, his spirit is certainly lifted. So let me get on with what I'm talking about. Now, I'm going back a while. In fact, I'm going back probably 20, 25 years, maybe more. And at the University of Nottingham, where I was a lecturer, I was invited to teach on an MBA programme, a Master of Business Administration programme, which was at that time was the flagship course of the university. And on this course, they had different modules, but I was asked to. I already taught a module on the course, and I taught on that course for 16 years I was there, and then probably another 3 or 4, probably about nearly 20 years. So I knew about the course, but I taught manufacturing management. So I was chuffed to be invited on a course they asked me to run called Interpersonal Skills. Now, my job on that course, there were others that taught on the course, but we all had a tranche of students. I think it was about 20 in number. So say there was 100 students, then we would have 5 different tutors running the course each week. And the job there was to improve their interpersonal skills. And I saw my job, well, I was taken on, I suppose, to enable them to be happier, to show them what happiness was, to get their mindset on happiness, a knowledge of it, what it is, and to see that it is there, what happiness is, and how to improve their levels of happiness. But it was set very much in them getting to understand themselves a little bit. And on this particular module, this is what I'm going to relate to one particular session that I took with them. On this session, what we did was we got big pieces of paper, sellotaped together, so we could put the pieces of paper on the floor, and enough so that when a student laid on, and these, by the way, are master's level students, mature students from all walks of life, industry, business, to get this education in management, right? And anyway, on this particular module, what we did was we got the students to lay on, each student in turn, to lay on this piece of paper, and another student drew round the person, so that when they stood up, you could see an outline on the ground of this student, and we used to sit around the diagram on the floor. So we sat in a circle, as it were, and then the particular student who had been drawn around was asked to relate to parts, and using a crane again, to relate to parts of the body where they felt some anguish or pain. It could even be physical, but mainly it was emotional pain, where they said it existed. And sometimes people, pointed to their heart, or their neck or the chest, and other people pointed to the head. In fact, most, I think, pointed around the head, but it varied. Anyway, this particular student, it was not very nice, really, because My computer keeps doing things like this. Excuse me. Anyway, so he started getting upset, and he started to cry, and it was basically, please, I don't want to discuss how I feel. Next person, pass. And I think he was the only one in the class at that time that did do a pass, because most of the students were very eager to talk about their upsets and hurts and where they felt it was in their body and talk about themselves. And there's nothing wrong in that. In fact, it was quite cathartic that they did, because this was nice, because it was a management course. Now, most of the topics on the course, like finance and marketing, etc., were very hard-nosed subjects about that type of management. And so it was very nice to have this particular module called interpersonal skills, which looked at people's feelings and how they communicated with each other. And I suppose my job there was to facilitate this. Anyway, so we got over that. But the thing about this particular student, he was from the Arab nations, and I forgot where. But he was. This used to happen. Every now and then we got a millionaire on the course. Seriously. I suppose nowadays there'd be billionaires, but then we got the odd millionaire. And it's unbelievable, because this guy who was a millionaire, now I didn't know that until I talked with him. And I'll give you the lead up to why I found this out. But he was a millionaire. And when I found out he was a millionaire, I asked him to talk to the class, the rest of the class. In fact, devoted a bit of a session to him to talk to us about how he made his million, how he'd become a millionaire, because of the business acumen he obviously had. And it is quite funny, because I said to him, well, I'm not a millionaire. And, and all the other students, why are you here? What are you doing on a course when you don't need to, when you're already a millionaire? In fact, whilst he was a student, his company abroad were making more money than we could ever dream of for him whilst he was a student. And he simply said to me, I just want to learn formally how to manage. And, you are, I don't know what things, I'm sure it is still, we were a flagship institution. The MBA programme at Nottingham University was revered. So there you go. And that was quite funny, that he'd come to learn formally what we thought, others thought management was. And so we that was a good learn. And essentially what he'd done was, and I don't know much about this, but he got workers to in the mountains that are there, he got them to dig chunks out of the mountain to make aggregate for making roads. So the country was still in development and they needed the road material, and he went to the local prince in the principality who owned that particular mountain and said, look, can I take some chunks out of your mountain for building roads? And the prince said to him things like, how many trucks have you got? Can you do this? Show me your credentials. And between me, you and the gatepost, he fibbed a bit, but he might have blagged, but basically he got the nod from a particular prince, and for another mountain, another prince. And once he'd got one done, he got the other. And he had fleets of lorries digging aggregate rocks out of this mountain to make roads. And I think, I can't remember, but it was basically the prince would say to him, so long as you give me 10% of what you're making. Oh yeah, so there you go. I mean, shouldn't we also kind of be able to do that? He was just a natural businessman. And we learnt from him. But what happened was, students, most of the students dressed like students. He didn't. He was suited and booted. he had a posh flat and a posh car. And one day he came in and he told me that his flat had been trashed and his car had been scraped, and he was very upset about it. And I had a talk with him, and I mean, the students at Nottingham University, very good students, would not do things like that. But obviously where he lived, he'd been stood out and what have you, and some bad people had done that to him. Maybe they were jealous of him, or maybe he didn't fit in. I don't know what it was, but they'd done it. And so he had a chat with me about this all and was very upset about it. And I don't know whether this is the right advice, but I said, you've got to try and fit in. I mean, why should I say things like that? But, like, it was basically try and dress down a bit like the other students, and, you've got this posh car. Well, that's bound to attract attention. And so, bless him, this is what he did. And I kind of made me think quite a bit about how the other students, and including myself, viewed this particular man, who was quite a decent chap. He was quite a pleasant chap, intelligent chap. And so I'm going back to now this diagram where he'd laid on the floor and wouldn't discuss any pain, emotional pain that he had. But what I found out was, when I was chatting to him, was that he started crying. He said when he had a daughter, and when she was 2 years of age, although he had money and what have you, and I think it was his early days, so whether or not, I don't know the details of it really, but he could not get her the proper medical treatment. And where in the country where he lived, there were diseases and probably not the right drugs available at the time, or treatments. I don't know what happened, but he lost his daughter. His daughter died, and when I talked to him, he sobbed and said, "Look, I would live in rags if I could have my daughter back." And I really did feel, so sorry for him. And my heart went out to him, because here's this chap, millionaire, got lots of money, but it meant nothing. And he'd really suffered because of this, because he'd lost his child at such a young age. And anyway, in a roundabout way, I conveyed this to the other students, and in fact I made it a kind of a learning point, as it were. And their attitude towards him did change, well, more or less immediately, because I suppose what I was talking about is that we're all the same. You can look at other people and you might think you're above them, or you might think you're below them, but you're not in their shoes. And in this case, look at this guy, had everything, had all the money you would wish to have, and yet he was very sad in his heart. And so I thought it was an equaliser. It was a good grounding for us all. And I talked to the rest of the students in his absence, and it grounded us. We had to realise that, but for the grace of God, and all the rest of it. And you see, the thing is, I don't want to appear to be critical of the MBA students, because they're great people. But they are very intelligent, quick-witted, and not all of them, but some of them are very ambitious and wanting to get on, and have what I would call a lot of intellectual prowess, but very little emotional intelligence. And so that's what I saw as my job, to kind of make them aware, in fact, including myself, more aware of our emotions and how things can hit us or not. And that even though you may be a boss in industry and be in charge of people, that these people are not ants, they're not workers. You've got to respect them. They all have their lives and difficulties and problems. And in fact, you'll get the most out of people when you treat and them with respect and understand them, that they can have these type of problems, just like our particular student I'm talking about. So that was the whole of what I'm trying to do, is look at the fact that we are basically, whether we're there or there, we are all the same. And that's why I call it Kings and Vagabonds. But I was going to call something else. I don't like it. I was going to call it Grounding, We're All the Same. It's just a thought, thinking people are higher than us or lower than us, because it is just a thought, because it's a belief. We believe this, but what is a belief? It's just a thought. And so, no, I called it Kings and Vagabonds and Kings, We Are All the Same, because, so right, there is lyrics on the song, because that's what popped into my mind. And it's Elton John and Tim Rice, lyrics from The Lion King, Can You Feel the Love Tonight? And the lyrics are, and can you feel the love tonight, how it's laid to rest? It's enough to make kings and vagabonds believe the very best. There's a time for everyone, if they only learned that the twisting kaleidoscope moves us all in turn. There's a rhyme and reason to the wild outdoors, when the heart of this star-crossed voyager beats in time with yours. Well, I mean, I could have cried. I mean, those, The Lion King, and I didn't quite, and I had to go on the web and get the details of this, but that did pop into my mind about the fact that, you know, you've got kings and you've got vagabonds, and there is no difference. And there was, like with that student whose daughter had died, and the sadness and the grief that he had, it just basically, same as a vagabond. A vagabond, same as a king when it comes to that level. And we're all the same. And in fact, I've got it here, from the lyrics, whether we are kings or vagabonds, which I've just read to you. The twisting kaleidoscope moves us all in turn. And I put in fair's life as a plan and knows what it's doing. When we go with the flow of life, we reap its natural rewards. Well, there is something, and I'm not going hope I'm not going woo-woo on all this, but my experiences through life is that no matter what we do, there is other forces, and I don't mean other people. I don't mean I'm talking, I don't know what I'm talking about really. I'm talking about there's another intelligence, which I don't understand. But I know that it does. That life moves on, life changes, and we can't do anything about it. Now, that's not to kind of put us in a state where, oh my God, we can't do anything about it. Life itself is what it is, and we've been given life. And when we go with the flow of life, not like a dead fish, I don't mean it like that. I'm talking about when we start thinking life is different to what it is, because life is life. When we start thinking, oh, you know, I'm getting old, oh, you know, that person doesn't like me, oh, you know, I've not succeeded, you know, as against, I'm not a millionaire, then we're going against the flow of life, because, I mean, well, life is what we make it. And if we want to make it miserable, well, all I can say is, and don't get upset about this, but if you want to make it miserable, fill your boots, because you will. If you think life is miserable and against you, you will. When you start going with life is, you look for it being better, you try to make it better because you get in that mindset that it's better. And when things that are better appear, you notice them quicker. And going back to what I said right at the beginning, and I will do a particular podcast on this, when you go on, like as I did, a happiness course, you get to learn what happiness is. You start looking out each week for happiness things, because you start to look out for them, and going with that type of mindset, your awareness, your consciousness shifts, and from a kind of a low base to a higher base, which is better. Now, I think that's all I can say there. The other, what I can just add to that is that this particular chap, at the end of the course, he gave me, what was it? It's a silver dagger in a box, and I mean, believe me, because he was a millionaire, I think it's pure silver, and it's about 6 inches high and about that deep, this dagger. Now, I've never got rid of that dagger, and I've never opened the case that it's mounted in. It's just hung on the wall downstairs because I daren't. Because I don't want to interfere with good luck. It was given in good faith, and I'm keeping it. I would never sell it or anything like that. But I looked up what this dagger meant, and apparently in certain cultures it means different things. And it's like a monumental dagger. And in some cultures it says, I'm reading here, it says it's a status symbol amongst warriors, a sign of strength, status, position, power and authority, something to be admired and something to be feared. Well, it's a dagger, isn't it? But what I also looked up is, it said, in some cultures, the dagger is a tool for sacrifice and spiritual purification. It represents the shedding of old habits and beliefs, important word there, in order to make way for new growth and transformation. Isn't that great? There's a reason why he gave it to me. In this way, the dagger can symbolise rebirth and renewal, reminding us that sometimes we must let go of old ways of thinking in order to move forward in life. Brilliant. So that student who gave me that, who was a millionaire, well, he was also very wise and very understanding. And he did change on the course. He did become one of the gang, as it were. And he showed humility. And I'm not just kind of being patronising here. I felt so humble that I got a gift like that from him, because what he was saying to me was, look, we can all change. And I've tried to change. In fact, he did change. So there's hope for us all, and I'm not preaching here because I hope there's hope for me, and I hope there's hope for you, and there certainly is. I'll talk about something happier next time, and what I did on the happiness course and how it made me happier. So look, thank you for listening to this podcast. Thank you very much. Take care. I love you. Bye-bye.